Welcome to Hall and Estates and Succession Planning, a series of podcasts hosted by Ian Hall and Suzana Popvic-Montag. The podcast you are listening to will provide information and insights into estate planning in Canada. From the offices of Hall & Hull in Toronto, here are Ian and Suzana.
Hi, and welcome to Hall and Estate and Succession Planning. You're listening to episode 200 of our podcast today.
Hello, Suzana.
Hi there, Ian. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations to you. 200.
200.
Never thought we'd make it.
That's for sure.
Boy, when we first started this.
It's amazing. I almost feel old, but not quite.
No, I'm sure you don't, because you're not. But I wonder, if I look back, we'll have to check for another day for when we actually started this, what the first podcast date was. But anyway, we're at 200. Yahoo!
Over 200 weeks ago, I'd sort of guesstimate.
I'm guessing. We have missed the odd one, but we haven't pod faded, which is always the worry. All right, so back to philanthropy and charity and how we can better understand what that concept is about so that we can better give advice to our clients. Because too often it is just the old-fashioned sit in the chair, the client's across the desk from you, and they come in and they say, well, we've always thought we should give something back to the community. The lawyer in the old days used to be, hey, well, here are the 3 charities that I recommend. Those charities would land in the will, and that's your charitable donation. It wasn't thought of during lifetime to give charity as much, and it wasn't thought of as to who you're going to give to. So now we have a sophisticated charitable giver.
And for those of you who may have missed our podcast last week, what Ian and I are discussing really is the book called The Art of Giving, which is a great book that Ian has introduced that's written by Charles Bronfman and Jeffrey Solomon. So I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in pursuing this in a little bit more in depth.
And to help me get inspired, which this book inspiring is, and we talked about in the last podcast, there's sort of 4 parts to the book. The first part talks about understanding who the donor is and what is a donor, and we talk about the concept that an individual, everyone has a little different way of dealing with charity. Impose a business model on that by saying, well, let's look at our customer and figure out that. The second part, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, are who are your partners in the process and who can you work with to help make even more charitable impact. The third part is looking at the gift itself and looking at some of the practical implications of the gift itself, whether it's going and serving the soup at the soup kitchen, or whether it's writing the check, or whether it's forming a group to have a fundraiser, the different roles. And then finally, setting out some resources. The book is full of great resources.
That's good.
Now, before we start into the partners part of it, let's talk about what I think, and I still got to come back to, is the foreword by James Wolfenson. I'm probably saying it wrong. Very prestigious man, former president of the World Bank. A great quote from the book. He said this. He says, "The big secret of philanthropy is now out through this book." And he's describing how much he loves the book. He says, "Philanthropy is fun. It is joyful, it is fulfilling, and it will make your life feel worthwhile in ways that few other enterprises can." And if I can, as an advisor for my clients, impart that enthusiasm to philanthropy, then I think we've added new value to our relationship with our client. So it's not just about mark down and a great charity like the Heart and Stroke and give my residue and 1/3 of my residue to the Heart and Stroke. We encourage that. But let's add some life and fulfillment to the gift and the process.
And that's a really neat way of thinking about it, I think, because it does add excitement to the process, as you say. And the truth is, we're seeing estates that are much larger than they used to be even 5-10 years ago. And so to be able to inspire people to do good for goodness sakes and yet feel really good about doing it as well, I think is a nice little package.
Well, it's funny you say that. That's a good point, that we are seeing more money and more transfer of the wealth is coming in. And so again, we need to, as service providers, need to be ready for that. And we need to, I think, push back a little bit on our clients in terms of what they're going to do. Are they just going to be check writers? Are they just going to be deliverers of the charity? And some interesting statistics from the book, and I pulled them out of this book because often people like the nuggets. And this book has some terrific statistics about some of the charitable giving and the U.S.-based numbers. But let's just talk about a few of those just to give a bit of a wow effect on charities.
for sure. And just looking here at the statistics, the book tells us that there's $40 trillion is going to be passed down from the baby boomers to their parents and grandparents from the World War II generation. That's $40 trillion.
And it goes on to say it's 400 times this year's U.S. military, 400 times this year's military budget for the United States of America, and 12 times the entire outlay of the federal government. These are kind of numbers that are staggering.
They're very surprising, frankly. There's a 2007 record-breaking $306 billion was made in charitable contributions.
And about 74% of charitable contributions comes from individuals in the U.S.
It's really hard to fathom that kind of money. Really.
But the one startling fact is that, what is it now, a majority of the givers make less than $100,000 a year.
That is surprising.
So you imagine how broad-based we have to keep, as a charity, you have to keep your interest and your enthusiasm going.
That's true, because the group of potential people who are going to fund these bequests, I mean, look, if they're under $100,000, I mean, I find that really quite surprising.
So it doesn't surprise me to see guys like Charles Bronfman and Jeffrey Solomon writing a book of the business plan behind giving.
Absolutely.
Because it from a charitable standpoint, it requires a business efficacy approach to charitable giving. And if, as advisors, we can help with that, because we're going to say, here are different ways to gift. Here are different ways to motivate charitable giving. And if you've got a son that doesn't seem to be interested in X part of your business, but really is a great deliverer of charitable giving, maybe what you're doing is creating a foundation and employing him as the head of the foundation to deliver that charity.
A very different kind of mechanism by which you can gift to people and share that those resources that you have during your lifetime, I think.
And that's for the rich. But for the rest of us, the normal people, it is bringing real life to the effectiveness of the gift during your lifetime and after your lifetime. And so we really, and this book has helped sort of, again, give us some good clues on that. Again, we're learning about who the donor is. Now let's talk about some of the partners. What does it mean? The whole second part of the book deals with partners in charitable giving.
And I think there we're looking sort of as the package deal, like who are the people who are part of all of this? And we're looking at financial planners, we're looking at the investment advisors, we're looking at the individual who's actually going to be funding the money, the members of the family that are going to benefit from it, those kinds of individuals.
And organizing that partners, like any good business, organizing your partnership and organizing the strengths and weaknesses around that to help, again, bring life and enthusiasm to, as was said earlier, make philanthropy fun, joyful, and fulfilling.
And it's funny because you're pointing to a quote, and the other one that sort of struck me as interesting was that if you can't measure the impact of your gift, you shouldn't actually make it. And I just thought that seemed almost a little bit counterintuitive when I thought about that.
Well, it's a real struggle in that. And I see it, the measurement of gifting and the measurement of giving as really a fundamental component of the book. And what we'll do is in our next podcast, talk about the measurements that the book has employed into it and talk about how we can start to see what does it mean to be the giver and the measurements in that regard. So again, thank you for making it to 200.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for the audience who have watched from time to time, maybe not all 200, but we have all 200 on iTunes.
Yes, we do.
All right. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Hall and Estates and Succession Planning by Ian Hall and Suzana Popvic-Montag. The podcast that you've been listening to has been provided as an information service. It is a summary of current issues in estates and estate planning. It is not legal advice, and you're reminded to always speak with a legal professional regarding your specific circumstance. To listen to other Hull & Hall podcasts or leave any questions or comments, please visit our website at hullestatemediation.com.